People often misinterpret silence as fear, as if not reacting immediately means you're cornered or powerless. What they don't see is how silence turns pain into purpose. They don't see the way your thoughts sharpen, how your emotions settle into place, how your strength gathers like a storm waiting for the right moment to break open. Every second you choose not to respond is a second you're growing, understanding, reclaiming the pieces of yourself they tried to take. Silence teaches patience, the kind that doesn't come from waiting for circumstances to change, but from preparing yourself to change them. It teaches control, not of the world, but of your own reactions, your own energy, your own direction. And once you learn that control, the people who tried to hurt you lose theirs. Silence also reveals truth, about others and about yourself. When you stop engaging, when you step back, when you let the noise die out, people show you who they really are. The ones who tried to silence you become louder in their desperation, exposing their intentions without even realizing it. Their lies begin to unravel because without your reactions to feed their narrative, they have nothing left to twist. Those who supported you weakly fade away, revealing they were never rooted in your life to begin with. But those who truly value you step closer, quietly, without demands, without pressure. Silence filters your world, removing the unnecessary and leaving only what has meaning. And while all of this happens, you evolve. You begin to understand that silence isn't about running away, it's about choosing your battles with intention. It's about saving your voice for the moment when it will have impact. It's about watching the pieces fall into place on their own because you finally stopped trying to force them. You start to recognize that not everything deserves your reaction, not everyone deserves your explanation, not every attack deserves your time. Some things are best answered with. The comeback begins long before anyone notices. It begins in the nights when you sit with your thoughts instead of fighting them. It begins in the mornings when you choose not to carry yesterday's weight. It begins in the moments when you decide to let your growth speak louder than your anger. Your silence becomes the doorway to a strength that is steady, intentional, and unstoppable. It becomes the foundation of the comeback that no one saw coming because they were too busy celebrating what they thought was your fall. And while they believed your silence was the end of your story, you were quietly rewriting the beginning of a new one, shaping it with clarity, resilience, and a fire that grows stronger in the dark, waiting for the moment it will rise. Their lies were loud, but my truth was louder. Lies have a strange way of spreading, they travel fast, shaped by jealousy, fear, and insecurity. They grow wild like fire, fueled by whispers, assumptions, and the satisfaction people get from tearing down someone they secretly envy. When those lies were thrown at me, they weren't gentle or subtle. They came with force, wrapped in confidence, spoken by voices that believed volume could replace honesty. They thought if they said something enough times, if enough people repeated it, if enough ears heard it, their version of the story would become the only version that mattered. And for a while, it might have seemed like they were right. Their noise drowned out everything, the truth, my side, my silence. People chose the louder story because it required less thinking, less understanding, less courage. It's easier for the world to believe a lie that entertains them than a truth that challenges them. But lies, no matter how loudly shouted, are fragile. They depend on attention to survive. They need chaos to stay alive. They require an audience that doesn't ask questions. The moment you step back, the moment you refuse to feed their narrative, the moment you stop reacting emotio. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. While they were busy shouting, I was watching. While they were spreading poison, I was gathering clarity. While they were building their walls of lies, I was quietly holding on to every piece of evidence, every memory, every detail that would one day turn their voice into nothing more than a hollow echo. People often forget that the truth has a rhythm of its own. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't need an audience to grow stronger. It grows in the shadows, waiting to step into the light at the exact moment lies finally begin to collapse under their own weight. They underestimated me because they misunderstood silence. They assumed I had no defense because I wasn't shouting back. They thought I had no strength because I wasn't fighting on their level. They mistook my calm for defeat. But calm is not surrender. Calm is control. Calm is the ability to hold your ground without letting noise shake your foundation. Calm is the kind of power that doesn't need approval to exist. And while they were using every ounce of energy to make the world believe their version, I was preserving mine for the moment that truly mattered. Eventually, lies lose their shine. People grow tired of the same exaggerated stories. Doubt slowly creeps in. Questions start forming. Inconsistencies become impossible to ignore. The louder the lie, the easier it becomes to expose. And when the truth finally steps forward, it doesn't arrive with noise, it arrives with clarity. It doesn't argue, it reveals. It doesn't attack, it exposes. It doesn't overwhelm, it simply stands there, undeniable, unshakable, impossible to silence. And when the truth stands tall, everything built on lies begins to crumble. When my truth surfaced, it didn't just speak, it echoed. It echoed through the same halls where their lies had spread. It echoed through the same people who once doubted me. It echoed through the same minds that once believed noise was power. The truth. And as the truth grows louder, you begin to understand something deeper about yourself. You realize you didn't need to shout to be heard. You didn't need to convince anyone to believe you. You didn't need to match their intensity or lower yourself to their level. Your strength wasn't in your words but in your patience. Your power wasn't in your reaction but in your resilience. Your victory wasn't in winning the argument, it was in letting the truth win for you. Their lies may have been loud at first, louder than anything I could say. But my truth carried weight, carried proof, carried integrity. And when it finally rose, it didn't just silence them, it erased everything they built on falsehoods, leaving them with nothing but the echoes of their own noise. Their lies were loud, but my truth was louder. Lies have a strange way of spreading, they travel fast, shaped by jealousy, fear, and insecurity. They grow wild like fire, fueled by whispers, assumptions, and the satisfaction people get from tearing down someone they secretly envy. When those lies were thrown at me, they weren't gentle or subtle. They came with force, wrapped in confidence, spoken by voices that believed volume could replace honesty. They thought if they said something enough times, if enough people repeated it, if enough ears heard it, their version of the story would become the only version that mattered. And for a while, it might have seemed like they were right. Their noise drowned out everything, the truth, my side, my silence. People chose the louder story because it required less thinking, less understanding, less courage. It's easier for the world to believe a lie that entertains them than a truth that challenges them. But lies, no matter how loudly shouted, are fragile. They depend on attention to survive. They need chaos to stay alive. They require an audience that doesn't ask questions. The moment you step back, the moment you refuse to feed their narrative, the moment you stop reacting emote. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. While they were busy shouting, I was watching. While they were spreading poison, I was gathering clarity. While they were building their walls of lies, I was quietly holding on to every piece of evidence, every memory, every detail that would one day turn their voice into nothing more than a hollow echo. People often forget that the truth has a rhythm of its own. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It doesn't need an audience to grow stronger. It grows in the shadows, waiting to step into the light at the exact moment lies finally begin to collapse under their own weight. They underestimated me because they misunderstood silence. They assumed I had no defense because I wasn't shouting back. They thought I had no strength because I wasn't fighting on their level. They mistook my calm for defeat. But calm is not surrender. Calm is control. Calm is the ability to hold your ground without letting noise shake your foundation. Calm is the kind of power that doesn't need approval to exist. And while they were using every ounce of energy to make the world believe their version, I was preserving mine for the moment that truly mattered. When my truth surfaced, it didn't just speak, it echoed. It echoed through the same halls where their lies had spread. It echoed through the same people who once doubted me. It echoed through the same minds that once believed noise was power. The truth has a way of piercing through the fog created by deception. It has a way of cutting through the illusions people build to protect their own insecurities. And when it rises, it doesn't just clear the air, it transforms it. Those who once cheered for the lie suddenly step back, trying to distance themselves. Those who once spread rumors fall silent, knowing they can no longer hide behind the crowd. Those who once mocked you realize they misunderstood your silence entirely. There is a special kind of victory in letting your truth speak at the right time. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not desperate. It's steady, powerful, and absolute. It hits harder because it's undeniable. It dismantles every false claim, every twisted narrative, every mask they wore. The same voices that once shouted begin to tremble. The same people who once pointed fingers start avoiding eye contact. The same crowd that once fed on the lie begins to shift sides, because truth, no matter how delayed, commands respect. And as the truth grows louder, you begin to understand something deeper about yourself. You realize you didn't need to shout to be heard. You didn't need to convince anyone to believe you. You didn't need to match their intensity or lower yourself to their level. Your strength wasn't in your words but in your patience. Your power wasn't in your reaction but in your resilience. Your victory wasn't in winning the argument, it was in letting the truth win for you. Their lies may have been loud at first, louder than anything I could say. But my truth carried weight, carried proof, carried integrity. And when it finally rose, it didn't just silence them, it erased everything they built on falsehoods, leaving them with nothing but the EC. Every attempt to break me only sharpened my resolve. At first, their actions felt heavy, like stones thrown at a fragile surface, each hit leaving a mark, each wound a reminder of how deeply people can cut when they believe you are too weak to fight back. They pushed, they sabotaged, they whispered, they manipulated situations just to see me stumble. They expected me to collapse under the weight of their cruelty, to crumble at the pressure they built around me, to give up so they could feel victorious. But what they failed to realize is that pressure doesn't always destroy, it transforms. It shapes. It strengthens. Every push they gave didn't send me backward, it sent me deeper into myself, into a space where strength was forced to grow. Pain can either break a person or forge them. They assumed I would be the first kind, the kind who bends until breaking, the kind who sinks beneath self-doubt and fear. But with each attempt they made to weaken me, something inside me grew harder, more grounded, more defiant. Instead of breaking, I began to understand where true resilience comes from. It's not the loud, fearless kind people display when everything is going right, it's the quiet, determined kind that forms when everything is going wrong. Every time they tried to take something from me, my peace, my confidence, my reputation, they unintentionally gave me something in return, a reason to rise, a reason to fight, a reason to become stronger than I had been before. There were moments when I felt the sting, when their words pierced deeper than they should have, when their actions left scars that took time to heal. But those scars didn't weaken me, they reminded me of what I survived. They reminded me that I had endured more than they ever expected. They reminded me that even when they tried to crush me, I refused to let myself stay down. They may have shaken me, but they never shattered me. They may have tried to break my spirit, but they only succeeded in awakening it. Ever. People who try to break others often underestimate the resilience of someone who has already known pain. They think they are delivering the final blow, unaware that the person they are trying to destroy has survived storms far larger than anything they could create. Pain doesn't scare someone who has faced it before. Pressure doesn't intimidate someone who has already carried heavier burdens. Their attempts to break me became almost predictable, almost uninteresting, because I began to see through them clearly. I began to understand that their behavior said more about their weakness than it ever said about mine. And through that understanding, my resolve didn't just harden, it sharpened. It became focused, intentional, uncontrollable. I began to stop reacting emotionally and started responding strategically. Their insults stopped hurting, they became noise. Their rejections stopped discouraging, they became redirections. Their obstacles stopped overwhelming, they became stepping stones. I realized that as long as I allowed their attacks to define me, I would remain trapped in the narrative they were trying to write for me. But the moment I decided to write my own story, their power vanished. Every challenge they threw at me became another blade sharpening my determination. I stopped trying to prove myself to them and started proving myself to myself. I stopped asking why they hated me and started asking why I had ever cared. I stopped trying to be accepted by people who thrived on tearing others down. And that shift in mindset changed everything. My resolve grew beyond anything they could touch, anything they could influence, anything they could manipulate. They wanted to see me break because my strength threatened the version of themselves they were desperately trying to believe. They needed me to fail so they could feel superior. They needed me to fall so they could pretend they were standing taller. But every time they tried to tear me down, I found a new part of. The more they tried to push me into the shadows, the more I understood the importance of stepping into my own light. They thought silence would make me disappear, but silence became the space where I rebuilt myself. They believed exclusion would weaken me, but it only taught me who truly valued my presence. They assumed that taking opportunities away from me would stop my growth, but it only redirected me toward paths I might never have seen otherwise. Every attempt to erase me acted like a mirror, showing me what truly mattered, showing me who I wanted to become, showing me the kind of strength I didn't even know was forming inside me. Clarity doesn't always arrive gently. Sometimes it comes from being pushed so far down that you finally understand what it feels like to stand tall. When they erased my contributions, I learned the value of my own skills. When they erased my voice, I learned how powerful it could be when I chose to use it. When they erased my identity in conversations, I learned how important it was to define myself without waiting for permission. Their attempts to silence me didn't diminish my purpose, they magnified it. Every time they dismissed me, I asked myself why it bothered me, and those questions revealed deeper truths. I realized I had spent too much time seeking validation from people who only understood power when they were the ones holding it. I realized I had been shrinking myself to fit into spaces that weren't built for me. I realized I had been trying to appease people who had already decided who I should be. Their rejection wasn't punishment, it was liberation. It freed me from chasing acceptance where acceptance would never exist. There comes a moment when you stop trying to prove yourself to those determined to ignore you. There comes a moment when you refuse to let anyone else define your worth. There comes a moment when you understand that erasure is simply a tactic of the insecure, the threatened, the fearful. When you reach the clarity that comes from being erased is sharp and honest. It strips away illusions. It reveals the people who benefit from your silence and the ones who are intimidated by your potential. It shows you who stands beside you because they believe in you, and who stands against you because they fear the strength you are growing into. And when all the noise fades, when all the masks fall away, what remains is a version of yourself that no one can erase, not because they won't try, but because you no longer give them the power to. With every attempt to erase me, I gained more insight into what I was meant to do. Purpose is not always a grand revelation, it is often built from the pieces left behind after others try to break you. It grows from the scars of being overlooked, from the pain of being ignored, from the frustration of being misunderstood. Purpose forms in the tension between who people say you are and who you decide to become. And when you finally choose your own definition, you step into a kind of strength that cannot be erased because it no longer depends on external voices. I learned that erasure is not the end, it is the beginning of reinvention. When they tried to erase my past, I created a future. When they tried to erase my presence, I expanded it. When they tried to erase my identity, I defined it more clearly than ever before. The clearer my purpose became, the harder it was for anyone to diminish it. They could ignore me, but they couldn't stop my growth. They could silence me temporarily, but they couldn't silence what I was becoming. They could erase my name from their conversations, but they couldn't erase the impact I was destined to make. And so, every time they tried to remove me from the story, I found a way to write myself back into it, stronger, clearer, and more certain than I had ever been. Revenge wasn't my plan, growth was, and it terrified them. When people hurt you or underestimate you, their greatest fear is never that you'll fight back with anger, it's that you'll rise in a way they can't control. They expect you to crumble, to retaliate impulsively, to play the same small games they do. But nothing unsettles them more than watching you evolve beyond the limits they tried to trap you in. Growth is the kind of revenge that doesn't need confrontation, doesn't need words, doesn't need a stage. It's quiet, steady, powerful. It's the kind of transformation that exposes who you always were beneath the damage they attempted to inflict. And when you choose growth over retaliation, you step into a strength that outshines every attack they ever made. At first, I didn't even realize growth was happening. I only felt the pain, the betrayal, the disappointment they created. Their actions pushed me into dark corners where I had no choice but to reflect on myself, on my values, on my direction. They forced me to confront the parts of myself I had ignored, the wounds I had avoided, the insecurities I had tried to bury. But darkness has a way of teaching lessons that the light never can. It strips away illusions, reveals truths, and forces you to rebuild from the inside out. Slowly, the pain that they expected would destroy me started shaping me instead. They wanted me reactive, emotional, broken. They wanted me to lash out so they could say I had become everything they accused me of being. They wanted to provoke me into proving their lies true. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. I realized their behavior said more about their character than mine. So instead of fighting their battles, I began fighting my own, quiet battles within myself, battles to choose growth over bitterness, battles to choose discipline over reaction, battles to choose self-respect over validation. Growth becomes terrifying to those who rely on your weakness. When they see you. With each passing day, I grew further away from their negativity. Their insults stopped echoing in my mind. Their judgments became meaningless. Their attempts to belittle me only made me reflect on the reasons behind their behavior. I started seeing the cracks in their confidence, the insecurity behind their cruelty, the fear hidden beneath their arrogance. It became obvious, they weren't trying to destroy me because I was weak. They were trying to destroy me because I was growing into someone who exposed their own inadequacies. Growth is a quiet process. It doesn't happen loudly, and it rarely receives applause in its early stages. It happens in the moments people don't see, late-night thinking, early morning discipline, choosing restraint when anger tempts you, walking away when ego wants to stay, focusing inward instead of engaging outward. It happens in the moments when you realize you don't need revenge because becoming a stronger version of yourself already takes you beyond the reach of those who tried to hurt you. They cannot win against a person who isn't competing with them. They cannot destroy someone who isn't playing the same game. As I grew, I started reclaiming parts of myself I had forgotten. Confidence slowly returned, not the shallow confidence built on validation, but the deep confidence built on knowing I could survive, adapt, and rise again. My clarity sharpened. My purpose became more defined. The more I invested in my growth, the less room I had for their insults, manipulations, or attempts to control me. They were stuck in the same patterns, repeating the same behaviors, relying on the same tactics, while I was evolving beyond the blueprint they had for me. People who fear your growth will try to pull you back into familiar chaos. They will provoke you, question you, mock your progress, and remind you of your past. They do this because your evolution makes them uncomfortable with their own stagnation. They want you to stay predictable because why? In the end, my truth didn't just expose them, it destroyed everything they built on deception. There's a point where lies can no longer hold themselves together, where the weight of pretending becomes too heavy for even the most practiced manipulators. They thought their stories were solid, unbreakable, supported by enough people, repeated enough times, polished enough to sound real. But lies are fragile structures. They rely on shadows, on confusion, on silence, on the hope that no one will look too closely. Once light touches them, once truth steps forward, everything they've constructed begins to crumble from the inside. And they never expect it, because people who lie believe they are smarter than everyone else, especially the one they're trying to destroy. My truth wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It grew slowly, quietly, in the corners they assumed I would stay trapped in forever. While they were busy maintaining their narratives, I was piecing together reality. While they were trying to make me look small, I was gathering strength in ways they couldn't see or predict. Truth takes time to take shape, but once it does, it becomes sharper than any weapon they used against me. It begins to dissolve the illusions they spent so much effort crafting. And the best part is that it doesn't require my anger or my retaliation, it reveals itself naturally, powerfully, undeniably. The moment truth appears, people shift. Those who once believed their lies start questioning. Those who stayed silent begin to speak. Those who were manipulated start waking up. It's like a fog lifting, showing everyone the landscape for what it really is, not what they were told to imagine. Suddenly, their confidence cracks. Their certainty dissolves. Their control slips through their fingers. Deception thrives only when truth is hidden, but once truth steps out, deception collapses on its own weaknesses. They never prepared for that moment because they were too focused on Mainta. They never realized truth doesn't act alone. It exposes patterns, motives, histories, inconsistencies. Once one lie is revealed, every other lie begins to unravel like thread pulled from a badly woven fabric. Their carefully created image starts to break. Their alliances weaken. Their influence fades. People around them begin to distance themselves, not out of loyalty to me, but out of fear of being associated with a sinking ship. Truth has a way of isolating manipulative people. It shows everyone the difference between the face they present and the person they are when no one is watching. As the truth surfaced, I didn't need revenge or confrontation. I didn't need to shout or prove or explain. All I had to do was stand still and let their own actions circle back to them. They exposed themselves in ways they never imagined possible. They unraveled because deception requires energy, and the moment truth removes the need for performance, they run out of strength. Without lies to hide behind, they were seen for who they were, not powerful, not superior, not untouchable, but fragile, insecure, and terrified of accountability. Watching their deception fall apart wasn't satisfying because it hurt them, it was satisfying because it freed me. It freed me from the weight of defending myself from rumors. It freed me from the anxiety of wondering what they would do next. It freed me from the shadows they tried to trap me in. Truth isn't just a weapon against lies, it's liberation from them. It allowed me to breathe in a space where their narratives no longer mattered, where their influence no longer reached, where their attempts to control the story no longer held power. Truth also rebuilt me. It gave me back the parts of myself they tried to rewrite. It reminded me that I never needed their approval, that I never needed to shrink to fit their expectations, that my value was never dependent on their version of me. It showed me the strength I had gained while they thought they w. Their downfall wasn't something I orchestrated, it was something they created with their own hands. A person who builds on deception builds on sand. And when the tide of truth rises, sand cannot hold anything in place. The collapse becomes inevitable. The destruction becomes unavoidable. Everything they relied on, a false confidence, fake alliances, fabricated narratives, disappears the moment truth becomes too loud to ignore. And the most powerful part was realizing I didn't need to destroy them. Their own choices did it for me. Their dishonesty did it. Their arrogance did it. Their underestimation of me did it. I didn't win because I fought harder, I won because truth doesn't lose. It may take time, it may take patience, it may require silence and strength and resilience, but truth always reaches the surface eventually. And when it does, it not only exposes the darkness they tried to hide, it erases the foundation of their entire illusion, leaving nothing behind but the reality they spent so long running.